Yeah.
It won't go very far.
Let me know when you've got resistance.
I think you've realised that's pretty much as far as. Have we got sound?
Hello?
Oh,
yeah,
we have.
Hello?
Hello.
I've got to lean forward because of the desk, but that's why I'm like, why not? Yeah.
Can you hear me all right?
Sorry?
Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you fine, loud and clear. Yeah. Alrighty. Cool.
Are we ready to start? Yeah?
Whenever you guys are ready.
It's quite surreal looking at you flanked by two sort of flattering portrayals of US presidents.
Looks like Mount Rushmore.
Yeah. Yeah, very good, very good. All right. Well, I'm ready to deliver the opening statement. Admittedly, we didn't plan a whole lot in the way of opening statements, so it's going to be quite brief. But what we want to express, should I just get into it? Yeah. What I want to say, as far as opening statements go, is that we want to make a number of really strong points about why we thought that the previous Trump presidency might not have gone so hot, and therefore why we don't think that it would be the best move for America to have him as a president again. And that is a large part of why we don't think he should run. We also think that there are issues to do with the fact that his platform for running is incredibly unclear. And we are concerned that that is largely because his platform is contingent on a lot of dog whistle politics. And that that's not a very productive form of sort of democratic process, I suppose, one that runs on dog whistle politics. We've got a lot of information that we hope will convince you that he is a threat to a large number of people if he becomes president again, and that he has been in the past. Well, that's all really. But I look forward to hearing your side.
Oh, was that the opening statement?
Yeah.
So I don't have a speech prepared. This is all going from. Anyways, so when it comes to the new, not really as I would say as great due to multiple factors. So we have like multiple policies. A lot of people do believe that.
We're losing your sound a little bit. Okay.
Better?
Yeah, it is. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. So as I was saying, when it comes to multiple policies, we need to take into account like foreign policy or COVID policy or multiple different types of policies. When comparing both of them, we can see that Trump has actually handled them better than Biden has. And when I'm not going to present all the evidence now, but when we get further into arguing, that's when I will show how Trump's policies were actually better handling than Biden's policies are today. And that's my opening statement.
Yeah, don't worry, I'm not doing the next bit, but if there's a lot of clapping, that's because we know there's only it's just you on your own, and we all think that that's quite brave, so that's why we're clapping.
Yes, it's us. You need another chair.
I can't stand Yeah, I've got a paragraph there. Hi. We're going to talk about the economic and domestic arguments. We're going to do it in 2 parts, but we'll let you know when we're passing over. I am reading it off a computer screen, so it might be slightly less authentic than Beth. Okay. Trump blatantly favours irrational right-wing economics with no consideration of the consequences. Not only did he attempt to remove Obama's regulation on banks that were used to help prevent another financial crisis, but after his term in office, there were 3 million less jobs in the USA and an employment peak during his term, illustrating how his economic policies are too ideological to be practical. His economic policies have directly negatively affected on normal people, as his attempts to repeal the Affordable Health Care Acts would leave 4.6 million people without healthcare insurance. Yet, his horrendous economic policies are not just prevalent throughout his political era, but also in his businesses. He has numerous failing companies and is currently a CEO of a company being investigated for fraud. How can we expect a person to effectively run an economy when they can't even run their own country? Their own company. He was initially elected under the guise of being the embodiment of the American dream, but can't even run a simple business. He was born into privilege and therefore has stayed in privilege. The idea that he is successful, is doing well, is completely ignorant or deluded. During his election campaign, he ran on a platform of promising to save the industrial sector with an attempt to restore the old economic engine. But on Trump's watch, industrial production fell and manufacturing sector went into a recession even before the pandemic happened. It is indisputable that the USA is heading towards a financial cost of living crisis that is not similar to the UK, and therefore having a candidate with such economically conservative and laissez-faire policies would be suicidal and staff-destructive. His economic track record is disappointing at best, with it being the worst performance economically since a president during World War II. This is perfectly illustrated by his tariff wars he initiated with China, which ultimately caused American businesses to suffer with high costs and eradicated any short-term benefits of his tax cuts. He is reluctant to adapt some right-wing policies, showing how his approaches are too extremist. Now I'm going to hand over to Finn, our Vice President, who's going to go into more depth about domestic policies.
Mine's not quite as elaborate as that.
It's all right, I had a bit longer, didn't I?
I've been here for 5 minutes, but I'm going to talk a bit about his domestic policies as well as his immigration policies, because I think Trump, he deliberately targets some of the most vulnerable people on our planet with the Muslim ban, and also with the his policies on the southern border. Obviously, with his Muslim ban, I found it to be quite disgusting, frankly. And also, he had to reverse it in a few weeks anyway, so it didn't even work. And it shows how his impulsiveness is not comparable to Biden's more considered approach, shall we say. The fact that he's had to repeal one of his biggest policies within a few weeks of introducing it. Also, not to mention, it's just frankly inhumane that you're stripping 700,000 Mexican children away from their families. And it also had a quite profound impact on the American manufacturing industry as well, from a more economic standpoint. Some of these immigrants were very influential in factory work and stuff like that, and obviously not granting them citizenship quite heavily impacted that as well. So I think that's about all I have, unfortunately.
Thank you. Did we say sat here?
You can stay sat there while we hear the response to that, I think. Yeah.
I go?
Yeah.
So, a couple of points when it comes to the economy. So, during the Trump presidency, highest.
Tell him.
Yeah.
We're so sorry, we can't actually hear you.
I think it's the microphone on the computer.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
So, what I was saying, the stock market saw a huge spike under the Trump presidency. Dow Jones hit its highest during the Trump presidency compared to Joe Biden. Joe Biden's, when it comes to the stock market, was basically, and it is still kind of just standing still. It's like a flat line right now. It just kind of goes up and down, because what Joe Biden's effectively doing is basically forcing the stock market to basically stay in place by inflating it, if that makes sense. Also, we saw more jobs to the Trump presidency. And the only like way that we saw less jobs was not really because of Trump's policy. It was more because of COVID. Because of the COVID lockdowns, we saw a massive drop in massive unemployment rate. That's not really, you can't really put that on Trump. You can, because to be fair, there was a massive unemployment rate with Biden as well, because he was basically same circumstances of COVID. So it's not really his fault. And before COVID, before the lockdowns, we saw the lowest unemployment rate in a 50-year low. And to the point of when it comes to China, the reason why Trump fought about it with China was to help the American workers, because he saw like China's policy of like foreign trade to be incredibly unfair. Like he saw that China's exports were really coming here, while exports from the United States were going to China were being charged. And because of that, he saw it was unfair, and he saw it was hurting American workers. Also, another policy that was hurting, it's not really a policy, an effect that was hurting American workers was the illegal immigration. Now, despite your stance on illegal immigration, it's quite clear that it hurts the American worker. It destroys wages for everyone. Even if you're not a part of the same business, it destroys wages. You can look at an example when it comes to Florida. In Florida, there was a massive migration of Cubans going to Florida. And because of that, Florida saw that Florida saw its income drop. The average American, the average person up in Florida income dropped because a bunch of Cuban workers were coming in and basically taking the jobs that people in Florida were working. That effect also like lowers the wage, the minimum wage, because if people are surviving with less wages and people are taking advantage of that, then people are not going to be paying American workers that well either. Let's see if there's any more points. Also, most of your criticisms were really towards Trump, but we're not really addressing any of Biden's policies. We saw during the first month of Biden's administration, he was already getting rid of the pipeline, destroying millions, not hundreds and thousands of jobs with the pipeline. And because of canceling it, the economy also got hurt as well. We also saw a massive increase of gas prices. Unlike the Trump presidency, where gas prices were like, at least here where I live, were like $1 to $2. Now they have doubled. They have doubled. Not only increasing gas prices for everybody, but that also increases prices for like groceries and transportation. It's really hurting everybody right now. So where I work at a grocery store. I'm a cashier. Everybody always complains all the time about the grocery prices. They're like, I remember back in my day, $200 of groceries used to fill 2 baskets, right? Now, I hear it all the time. People are more angry because of it. Economy doesn't affect people's lives, and it affects workers' lives as well. Let's see, and that's really all. That's really all I have for when it comes to the economy. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Sorry, I'm still writing.
Can we respond? Can we respond?
I'm just going to touch upon, I'm not doing this in the order that you said it, basically. First and foremost, the points under Biden. I'd just like to touch on the fact that the debate isn't over who we would vote for, whether it be Biden or Trump, because effectively that's not the debate. The debate is on whether Trump should stand for re-election. And I think his failings economically stand on its own, not comparing them to Biden's politics, effectively. Also, when you touched upon the idea that during COVID, that was the reasons for us losing the loss of that proportion of jobs. Fair enough, that had a big impact, it definitely did in the UK as well, but we're going to another financial crisis. We're going into the cost of living crisis. And therefore, we've seen someone who isn't successful in a crisis and results in there to being a lot less jobs and crashes significantly. Why would we allow them to take on another crisis? It just seems self-destructive to me, ultimately. Have you got anything to add to that?
I'd like to go back to the illegal immigration, because that's kind of my thing. I have quite a lot of opinions on it, strong opinions.
I know, but we need to make sure we're not crossing over into the foreign section.
Oh, okay, I'll leave it then.
No, is that domestic or foreign?
I would argue it's foreign.
I'll leave the immigration.
Sorry.
But you can touch on it. When we do, yeah.
That's okay. I'll
Is
leave
there
it.
anything else? I don't really know.
Oh, it's the circumstances post-COVID. You was making comparisons with Biden, and that's
Yeah. And also, essentially, when we do talk about Biden, Biden's inherited the repercussions of Trump's COVID legislation. A lot of like economic failings that are occurring now are still repercussions of Trump's failings, still repercussions of what the actions he took during COVID. So we can see the economic gaining more stability under Biden's approach. Therefore, to take it back to someone who's so unstable as Trump, it's not what I do.
Also, I'd add to that there's a recession globally. It's not just a Biden problem or the gas prices that we're talking about. We've got really high gas prices and food prices here. So I wouldn't say it's just a Biden problem. It's more of a world problem. And it's caused partly by the Russia's war in Ukraine. It's caused by a lot of factors. But it's not just Biden, I'd say.
Did you catch that? No. Can I leave it? Sorry, I don't know where I'd go with it. Okay, I think we're done.
I can respond.
That's awesome. Thank you. Can you reply?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So, when it comes to gas prices, yes, the world does suffer from gas prices, but under the Trump presidency, the difference was that America.
Sorry, we didn't quite catch that. Could you go back?
Okay. When it comes to gas prices, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
When it comes to gas prices, the reason why it's different under the Trump policy. The United States, during Trump was president, we were making our own gas. We were being fuel efficient country. We're not going to like Saudi Arabia or pump oil and transferring to here. We were pumping our own oil from the United States. When Biden got into office, one of the first things he did was stop that plan, destroy the pipeline. And that pipeline had multiple people working on it. Jobs created because of the pipeline. And because of that pipeline, there was also cheaper gas. We didn't have to export our gas from other countries. We got our gas from our country. And because of that, yes, Joe Biden is responsible for gas prices. And let's see, when it comes to, by the way, just to like mention before, when I was mentioning Joe Biden's policy, I was trying basically saying when the debates about Trump being reelected, right? The reason why he should be reelected is because the reasons of the Biden policy. Not the debate whether overall Trump policies were better. The economy saw a spike. There was job growth. Unemployment hit one of its lowest in American history. And also inflation went down. As for now, inflation's
going up. Sorry, we can't quite hear you again.
What was the last part like?
Inflation we heard.
We heard about inflation.
Okay, so we're under the Trump presidency. There was a low inflation. There was prices, in fact, went down. Inflation went down. But under the Biden presidency,
Can we
respond?
Yeah, I think we've only got really 2 points to like come back that with, because we're gonna go in circles. But we just like to talk about like on the energy efficiency, and America was never independent and energy efficient within itself. It wasn't. And that was something that was started and implemented by Obama. That wasn't first of all implemented by Trump. It came from Obama and Trump ran with it. So it's not really a credibility to Trump because you weren't energy sufficient, and also it didn't start with Trump. So it's not a success of his necessarily. Have you got anything else to add?
No.
We're quite happy there and quite happy to move on to the next argument if you are.
Is that okay? Can we move on to foreign?
what happened?
Can we move on to foreign? Is that okay?
Yes.
Would you like us to move on to foreign policy, or do you want to?
Oh yeah, you can move on.
Is that okay? Is that all right?
Well, one thing before I say, if that's true about the
It is.
But it's done. That's true.
Sorry.
Joe Biden worked under the same administration as Obama. Why would he stop a policy that Obama started? That's it.
Because they're different presidents.
They work under the same administration.
They don't all have to do exactly the same thing.
Right, but you would think if they're like if he was your vice president, he would be on board with what Obama was doing.
It's a majority, but not necessarily all. And it's a different circumstance. We're in a different climate. We're in a different place. It's after the pandemic. It's a different situation that you're in. Anyway, we'll move on to foreign. Foreign ready?
Right. Check we can hear.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah. So, Donald Trump shouldn't run for president in the next election due to his outrageous foreign policy. During his presidency, his foreign policy was known to be incredibly unpredictable, and on multiple occasions, he has contradicted himself and gone back on international commitments, like the International Climate Agreement and also his threat to leave NATO. He's continuously embraced and pursued nationalist foreign policy through his America First policy and prioritized bilateral relations over multinational agreements. In a particularly fragile and delicate political climate, including Russia's invasion of Ukraine, is it really a good idea to have a man in power who has on multiple occasions been rumoured to have close ties to many Russian officials? As a matter of fact, a particular document alleged that the Trump campaign agreed to minimise US opposition to Russia's invasion into Ukraine in exchange for the Kremlin releasing negative information about his opponent, Hillary Clinton. He's also caused much controversy in an already controversial and explosive region through his recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And in terms of immigration, his policy, quite frankly, has been abysmal. For example, Trump administration at one point was unable to account for the whereabouts of nearly 1,500 migrant children who had illegally entered the US. Many Mexican families have been separated at the border, where he demanded the Mexicans paid for his wall. There's also the ICE campaign, which can be run at any time with no warning, and it can separate families and put them in camps. And if they can't prove with a visa or a green card, they can be deported at any time. And there's also high levels of abuse in these camps from the guards. He also banned people from 15 Muslim countries from travelling to and immigrating to the United States, further antagonising and straining an already difficult relationship. Yeah, that's...
Is that all?
Yeah, that's everything.
Give me a sec. I'm writing a little bit.
Yeah, no problem.
Too powerful British for them. Emma Thompson and Miss Jenkins.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Awesome. So, a couple of points I'd like to touch on. When it comes to foreign policy, Donald Trump was like one of the best. Because first of all, let's talk about Afghanistan. Afghanistan, we were going war of Afghanistan for years, and Trump finally ended it.
I can't quite hear you.
Oh, he can't hear me. Okay.
Okay,
Better?
you. Yeah.
Better. Okay, awesome. So Afghanistan. When it came to Afghanistan, Trump wanted to pull our troops out. We were there for a long time. It was the forever wars, right? We were in Afghanistan for a long time, fighting. And when pulling out troops, we're finally ending a war, causing less conflict.
I can't hear you again.
Okay. Better.
Yes.
Oof. Okay, so did you hear my Afghanistan part?
Yes.
Okay.
I heard most of it, just sort of cuts out at times.
Also, when it came to countries like North Korea, North Korea is no longer a big threat, right? Because it used to be North Korea was threatening America basically every week. Now it's no longer a problem anymore. Trump made peace with it, right? Trump was one of the first presidents to go.
I can't hear you again, sorry.
Okay. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
North Korea.
Yes.
Basically, Trump was one of the first presidents that go to North Korea and make peace. Not necessarily make peace, but lower tensions down enough that they're no longer a threat to us, right? And when it comes to nationalist policy, I say, why shouldn't Trump?
I can't hear you again, sorry.
When it comes to Trump's policy of America, why shouldn't he put America first, right? It's his country. Put the United States first because that's the thing for the country taken care of. When it comes to, say, the situation in Ukraine got invaded under Joe Biden. If Trump was like a Russian spy or working with the Russians or hates Ukraine that much, why didn't Putin just invade Ukraine during his administration? It would make more sense, right? But instead, he invaded under Joe Biden's administration. And because Putin knew that Joe Biden's foreign policy wasn't even that good, wasn't tough on anything compared to Donald Trump, where he was tough on foreign policy, right? We had terrorists taken down. Soleimani. We had Soleimani taken down. We had multiple people taken down.
Sorry, I can't hear you again. It sort of just keeps cutting out.
See what I can do to fix it.
He just said he's sorting his stand out.
Shift this thing.
Is it better?
Go ahead.
Hello.
No, they won't hear it now.
I
Okay.
didn't hear anything.
And go right here.
Okay.
Picture.
Hold on. Is it better now? Hello.
Try picture.
Yep, I can hear you a bit better now.
I think I'm gonna leave my camera off just to make the audio better. Is that all right with y'all?
Yeah, that's fine.
Awesome. What was the last part I touched on?
You were just saying about Afghanistan.
Afghan.
Yeah, you were just talking about like sort of the tough foreign policy, and you just sort of finished talking about North Korea.
So when it comes to Afghanistan, we had our troops pulling out, and Joe Biden effectively messed that up. So Trump made a negotiation with the Taliban. Well, we're going to pull out of the country so we can stop these wars, right?
Sorry, I still can't hear you.
My God. Like I am like as close to like the computer as possible. I'm practically kissing it. Hold on.
If I can't hear you, you can always type it in the chat.
No,
Why not?
no, that's not going to work. It's got to be spoken.
Okay, so ignore that.
Okay. Anyways, under the Joe Biden administration, where we had Trump negotiating with the Taliban saying we're going to pull our troops in a specific date, Joe Biden changed that date. He changed it without the Taliban's negotiation, effectively messing up the whole withdrawal process of Afghanistan. And when it comes to, say, foreign policy with China, during COVID, when it was a widespread pandemic, Trump saw a lot of criticism and lashback for like banning China and also locking down the country from China because of COVID. In fact, Joe Biden was calling him xenophobic because of it. And when it comes to the situation in Ukraine, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, well, people, okay. When it comes to the situation in Ukraine, people often say like Trump was working with the Russians, or there's like theories of Trump working with the Russian, he was a Russian spy, blah, blah, blah. But in all seriousness, if that's all true, if Trump was not strong in with his position of Ukraine, why didn't Russia invade when he was president? It would make more sense. Instead, Russia invaded during Joe Biden's presidency because he knew Joe Biden was not strong on his foreign policy, versus Trump, where Trump got action, Trump got terrorists taken down, he stopped wars, he made peace with countries. And when it comes to Trump banning Muslim countries, those countries weren't necessarily banned because they were Muslim. They were banned because they had like problems going there. There were terroristic threats, there were wars going on during the time, and that's why he banned those countries. If Trump truly wanted to ban countries just because they had Muslims in it, he would ban more countries, countries that are highly populated in the Muslim faith, like more countries in Africa. But we didn't see that. Let's see what else. And when it comes to the kids in cages thing, Trump actually, he stopped he did have a no tolerance policy for immigration, but he did change a couple of things. First of all, the kids in cages things were not made under Trump's presidency. They were a result of Obama's presidency, also presidency that Joe Biden worked in, as well as Trump actually stopped the child separation policy. So families were put in with a caseworker, and those caseworkers were trying to help those families get together before they would get deported. And when it comes to this, like the situation of immigration in and of itself, it's pretty clear, like to make that immigration is illegal, right? But people still do it anyway. And it's not like it's the only way to get through the country. There are multiple options to get to the country. If you don't want to wait, you can always do like military service. You and your family would get a green card and a visa if one of your family members are in the military. There's multiple options that people, there's multiple routes that people can take, but people still choose to do the illegal option. And that's not really, you can't really put that on the fault of Trump for enforcing the law. And that's really all.
Yeah, that's cool. So in terms of you sort of talking about the war in Afghanistan, you know, you were sort of saying about Trump, you know, negotiating with the Taliban in an attempt to sort of create peace. Whilst I understand that, at the same time, he then left it to the Taliban, which is obviously a terrorist state. So they not only left Afghanistan to the Taliban, they've also left them with incredible amounts of American weapons, which just gives them even more power. And then, you know, in terms of like during COVID, he called COVID the Chinese disease, which obviously is incredibly xenophobic and of course creates more tension in an incredibly unstable political climate already. And then, you know, when he was sort of, you know, as I said earlier, banned immigration to the US from 15 Muslim countries, he also referred to it as a Muslim ban, which of course, is incredibly Islamophobic. So I'd love to sort of hear your thoughts on that. And then with what you were saying sort of about the child separation due to immigration, that Trump sort of prevented that and put in a child separation, something to protect that from happening. He's the one who separated them in the first place. So I don't really think we can praise him for fixing something that he caused in the first place, because, you know, it never should have happened in the first place anyway. And then the DACA was something that Obama put in place anyway to support children and families. So, yeah.
All right. So a point I want to touch on first.
Sorry, just one more thing. In Afghanistan, I certainly wouldn't call that a successful foreign policy, because they are now, like, they're starving to death, these people.
Ready?
Yeah.
First of all, when it comes to Afghanistan, that was under the Joe Biden's administration, right? The withdrawal did not happen under the Trump's administration. The only thing that happened involving Afghanistan was a negotiation. That negotiation was changed. And because the negotiation was changed without any communication with the Taliban, that's why they got upset. And because Joe Biden did not make any communication, that's why it was a fail. It had nothing to do with Trump. Trump was not even president at the time. The only thing he did, again, was negotiate. When it comes to the Muslim ban, if Trump truly wanted to ban like all Muslim countries, he would have banned countries like Indonesia. Indonesia is the most highly populated Muslim country. He didn't ban it. Another thing brought up,
Going across the border, that was people who are illegal.
Also with the policy of like people like coming across the border, those people were coming in illegally. They were committing a crime, right? It's established that it's illegal, and people, again, there's multiple options to get through. Just people just don't want to do it, right? Also, when it comes to, say, Trump saying the China virus, you can't really argue that that's xenophobic, because we have like other stuff called like Spanish flu. The Spanish flu is not racist because it came from Spain. The China virus is a name because, well, it came from China. People weren't really happy with the fact. In fact, China was pushing a conspiracy against the United States that COVID was a military weapon. And Trump, when heard that, got upset. And he wanted to establish the fact that China, that the COVID came from China and did not come from the United States, like what China would say. And that's all I have.
Yeah, so you were sort of talking about like the Spanish flu. The Spanish flu was only ever referred to, it's always been referred to as the Spanish flu, not because of any sort of discrimination against the Spanish. That was purely because it was hidden from the rest of the world. In the first place it was ever really reported in was Spain. That's why it became referred to as the Spanish flu, whereas COVID was never like officially named the Chinese disease. That was just something coined by Trump, which is incredibly xenophobic, and I don't really understand how you could ever defend that. And his negotiations with the Taliban were completely unsuccessful. The withdrawal, whilst Biden was the one who followed it through, Trump was the one who organised it. And now women, especially women, children, they're now largely not allowed in public spaces. These women are largely denied any form of education. And they're not allowed in theme parks, they're not allowed in parks, they're not allowed in public places. You know, it's a war on women. And then you're sort of talking about immigration being a crime. And whilst, yes, it is, a lot of the people that are seeking asylum in the US and also in the UK and in lots of first world countries around the world, these people are coming to these places to seek a better life for themselves, their families, their children. And in a lot of cases, these war-torn countries that they're coming from are only war-torn because of the US and because of the UK. And the weapons that are used to destroy these places are supplied by the UK and by the US. So I don't really think that, calling it a crime, whilst, yes, it is, it's not fair to purely blame these people for trying to seek a better life. And I understand that you probably don't have children, and I don't have children, and I don't have children. But you know, if I was given the opportunity to give my family a better life, away from a war-torn country that was caused by, you know, the US, by the UK, by these countries that have got better opportunities for many, many people, then I would take it every day of the week. So yeah.
But do you guys want to move on? You want me to do a short response?
Can we go on to the last one?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Hello,
What's up?
I'm back.
Awesome.
Okay. Yeah. To be honest with you, we've kind of just got a miscellaneous category that we've just got some reasons that, like, we think he didn't do the best job. These are the sort of, you know, I don't know, other bits that we think are interesting. So a lot of them pertain to COVID-19 because obviously, you know, it was a massive global event that isn't covered by really the categories specifically. I mean, of course, 1.09 million deaths is sort of what the figure stands at, which, you know, is quite a lot. And the Trump administration, we would argue, sort of did almost nothing, very little to stem that. The fact that Trump himself, you know, internationally, whether or not you would agree with this, internationally, as seen as a figure of, you know, COVID skepticism, let's say, is you know, indicative of the way that the rest of the world views his dealing with COVID-19 and the sort of bits of advice that he gave the American people. You know, there was that very famous press conference about bleach and lungs and whether or not you could clean lungs, and which was, you know, one of the more interesting days as a politics student. But you know, while we're on the topic of Trump and his, you know, the sorts of things that he said, obviously my, you know, peer before mentioned about sort of the racial tensions that come from things like China virus, you know, that sort of language, the inflammatory language of describing anyone as an illegal alien. You know, we think that, you know, politicians stirring up this sort of hatred as, you know, translates directly into unlawful attacks on people, you know, and we're not coming at this from America has this hate problem. Like, you know, we see exactly the same thing in the UK, the same problem. So this isn't a Trump exclusive problem, but it is something that Trump does far more than most. Other things. Obviously, you've got, you know, I don't know how much you want to go into the Capitol Hill riots, especially considering, you know, the information so contentious. But you know, we don't think that the election was stolen in this room. I don't know about you, but we do think that he was a major agitator when it came to sort of the post-election kerfuffle. And that sort of denial of the sort of American values, you know, democracy, those sorts of things, you know, Trump appropriates them and he drops them as it suits him. You know, the recent calls to bin off the Constitution entirely is really interesting, especially considering, you know, a lot of his presidency was dominated by these interviews of him saying, you know, Article 2, and talking about the ways in which the American Constitution, at least he wanted to use it in ways that American presidents hadn't done before. Like, there was this essentially there's a very confused rhetoric about the importance of the Constitution coming from Trump, and this is, I guess, the stuff about the Constitution is less a criticism, although I'm sure as someone who, you know, values the Constitution, you might see it as that, and more something that I'm just interested to hear your thoughts on. Other than that, the stuff about the climate, you know, again, globally, he's perceived as a climate denier, a climate change denier, pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord. Anything else that I want to cover before we go on? Oh yeah, like locker room talk. You know, grab her by the, you know, like we don't. I mean, I don't know about you, but we don't want any kids to be growing up in a climate where that's promoted as the norm for conversations among men. You know, locker room chat, whatever you want to call it. Like, we think it's disgusting. I don't care if it's in a locker room. Anything else? God. I mean, there are more. One more. We'll do one more. I'll do. This is a personal one because I'm. Hold on. A personal one because I'm trans and I want to promote my brand. He ordered a ban on all transgender personnel from serving in the military during his presidency. One example of policy that is prejudiced against a very specific group of people for what I would call no good reason. Yeah, we'll leave it there. So just in terms of what I'd really like you to hear your take on, I'd really like to hear what you think about the Constitution stuff. Anything else that you want to argue against, go for it. But that's the bit that I'm sort of intrigued about. That's all from me.
Give me one sec.
Oh yeah, I'll stay actually. Sorry, I'll mute me and then you can go.
All right, can you hear me? Thumbs up.
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Awesome. So, let's begin. When it comes to the topic of COVID, first of all, make it clear that let's establish the fact that Trump administration was responsible for making vaccines. Right? Without the Trump administration, there would be really no vaccines, or we'd have vaccines years. In fact, he got criticized by multiple doctors, not just here in the United States, but all around the world about, what he's saying is not true, but vaccines are not going to vaccines takes years to process, but in his administration, he was able to do it within a year. Because of that, we see COVID's not really a huge threat anymore. When it came to, say, the Capitol riots, first, let's just establish, the courts found, when he was being impeached, the courts found that he was not guilty or not responsible for the Capitol riots happening. He never incited anything for the Capitol riots to happen, right? And when it came to, let's go back to COVID. I have a point on this. When it came to putting bleach, yeah, this was one of the things that people kept saying about Trump. But if you go back, in fact, I challenge you to find a video where he said, insert bleach or Lysol inside your skin or inside your veins or anything. And I promise you, you won't find it. You can look back at all the transcripts he said, all the videos he said, it's not there. That was something completely made up. But the only video like you can find where like people are saying this is him saying it is just him talking about how the sun and vitamin D is good from preventing COVID. And when it came to the climate issue, Trump did not see wind or solar energy as an effective use. And that's a fair criticism because, first of all, the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine. And in fact, we have a state here in the United States, California, that doesn't use gas, doesn't use fossil fuels as much. They use solar and wind energy. And because of that, they have constant blackouts, right? And it just goes to show that solar and wind are not effective. But he has promoted the use of nuclear energy. And nuclear energy, it's safe for the environment, and it's also able to produce enough energy to sustain the uses of energy we use here in the United States. And when it comes to, say, I don't know what category you want to call this, but I can just call it the LGBTQ. He actually ran a campaign against countries that killed their LGBTQ members. A lot of countries in the Middle East would throw LGBTQ members off roofs and try to frown upon that, and in fact ran a campaign to try to stop that. Also, when it comes to the military thing, the military is overall very strict to get in. Like, you can't have a tattoo in certain places if you want to go into the military. You can't have any history of suicidal actions or anything like that. They have very, very strict rules to get inside the military. Not everyone can get in. Let's see. When it comes to the topic of immigration, what was I going to say? When it comes to the topic of immigration, since Trump is on his American First campaign, he's prioritized the American worker, right? Immigration does affect the American worker in a bad way, right? Immigration would help the American business, right? Because the big fat cats will be hiring illegal immigrants and then paying them low wages, and then they're making a profit while the American workers just taking a hit, and that's not really fair. But to call it an immigration policy racist, I think that's a little bit far-fetched, because, well, heck, every country has an immigration policy. Mexico has an immigration policy. They deport people too. A lot of people, they have a lot of cases of people from South America like going up to Mexico so they can try to go to the United States, and they have to deport them back to their country as well. Overall, Trump's immigration policy is really just to help the American worker, and that's really all I have to say.
Yeah. So I mean, we've got the video. About the look. No, that's not fair. That's silly. Like I mean.
Does he actually say bleach though? I'm curious, because I actually tried.
Disinfectant.
Like,
disinfectant. I'm sorry we used the wrong chemical term.
Okay.
But disinfectant is just as bad.
But disinfectant doesn't necessarily mean a chemical, right?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Okay, well let's ditch that for now, because clearly, look, you asked for a quote, we've got you on. You agree to disagree from there on, because we think that means what we think it means. You think it means what you think it means. But I will say, I was just wondering what you would say about the grabber by the comment, because we never really got there, and we haven't got very long left. So I while I could answer your points, I think it would be interesting to hear your take on that and whether or not a US president can have that sort of reputation.
Well, we have multiple presidents that had we can talk about Bill Clinton, we can talk about Kennedy. If you don't know about those two, they were pretty
yeah, no, can I just say
very heavy on Buckroom talk. I would say heavier than Trump was. But
I'm not bothered about that, because they're not running.
But they did.
And if they were running, I'd say the same things. My issue is not whether or not a past president should be condemned for that, because I think they should. My issue is whether or not future presidents should be, potential future presidents should be allowed to enter that race. When we know that they're participating in that hostile environment for women. So that's the issue, not whether or not it exists.
To be fair, everyone has their moments. Everyone says, you probably had your moments. Regret. And I don't think that should be one quote shouldn't be a factor to stop a person from, right? I think if it's if Trump had multiple talk, sure, but one time or a couple of times, everyone has it. Joe Biden has it, Obama has it, and it should ended up be laying the voter. The voter sees that as effective or as appropriate, or let that voter decide. For a constitutional republic, we allow people to vote. So So
I think you're kind of cutting out a little bit now, by the way.
all I'm saying is let the voter decide. If the voter sees that as fit, that's their fault. It's not really whether they're eligible to run or not. The voters see that as appropriate. That's one of our values, right? And again, I just don't think that saying we're into bad things stop you from running.
Sorry, I got that.
Sorry. In regarding his own political viewpoints, regardless of the kind of personal view of his political viewpoints, he's also in November of this year hosted a meal, a representative of white supremacist and anti-Semitic groups.
Yeah. Did you hear that, by the way? We were just sort of, sorry, I know it was kind of a murmuring in the back, but we were just talking about like how, you know, beyond just whether or not it's a comment here or there, you know, this is like there's too much for us to tell you all the negative things that we, you know, all the negative things when it comes to sort of xenophobia or sexism or you know, like I could say, you know, that locker room talk comment, but I could also say, you know, his friendship with Epstein. I could say X, Y, Z. And when it comes to racial issues too, you know, we could talk about China virus, or we could talk about, you know, the fact that his companies, you know, have been in trouble for discrimination. We could talk about the fact that he platforms people who are white supremacists, or we could talk about the fact he retweets Britain First videos, like just all this sort of nonsense that builds up and builds up and builds up. And you know, in America, you know, most of your terrorism comes from the right, you know, and in our country we can see, you know, that statistically, whenever an important politician with a big followership makes that sort of a comment, hate crimes spike. You know, we saw it with Boris Johnson when he called Muslim women letterboxers for wearing like a traditional dress. Like, we saw assaults against Muslim women increase. You know, that sort of thing is rampant in politics, and yet you've got a president there, or you had a president there who was doing it week in, week out at a time when right-wing, you know, violence was at an all-time high. Like, I'm sorry, I'm letting myself get a bit emotional here. But so I just really have an issue with all of those sorts of things. But yeah. Sorry, I'm gonna leave because otherwise I'll go on forever.
One comment I would say. One comment I would say.
Just 1 second. Hello? Hello?
Yes, we're here. You ready to
Hi.
go?
Yeah, sorry, the students are going to have to go because they've got to get, it's the end of the school day for us and beyond. We finished at actually 3:15 and it's 4:05, and so some of them have got to go because of transport. We just want to say really thank you so much, and we genuinely appreciate it. And we thought it was a really good quality debate, especially since you only had one person who was involved in it. So we just want to say thank you. Big wave from everybody.
Thank you, bye.